I'm Dr. Rachel Griffiths, and I'm with my father and partner in aquatics.
Dr. Tom Griffiths.
Welcome to the Drowning Files, where each week we share a lawsuit we've been involved in or another true story with suggestions to learn from these tragedies to save lives. What case do you have today?
This case is quite unusual, and it involves a 14-year-old girl who was a very good athlete, a competitive swimmer. She was a rafting guide, and her whole family was very, very swimmer oriented. They did a lot of water sports, a lot of water activities, and they were very safety conscious. And on this particular day at a lake, um, in a camp environment that was owned by a YMCA, this young girl was there with a group of friends, about 5 or 6 friends, and they all decided to swim to a raft that was out in the outermost limits of the designated swimming areas. It wasn't that far away, but they all decided to go at the same time. It was undetermined whether they were racing or not. When she was deposed, when she provided sworn testimony of her accident, she said that she slowly jogged into the water. Now, some witnesses said that she ran into the water. And when she got to be about knee deep, as the witnesses stated, of course, the young girl said that it was waist deep where she dove in, but she dove in head first and fractured her cervical vertebrae. In other words, she broke her neck, but fortunately, she wasn't permanently paralyzed. Um, the number one way to become a paraplegic or quadriplegic, if you include all the sports and all the activities, the number one way is diving into the shallow water. People who are aquatic professionals should know this. Another fact is that 2/3 of all these accidents happen in the open water, like this one. Anyway, so some people said she began her dive when she was in ankle deep water. Others said that she was in waist deep water. But when she dove in, she fractured her neck. It required surgery. She had severe headaches. Uh, she lost her memory, some of her memory, but apparently she was not paralyzed. So she was very lucky in that case. So the parents brought a lawsuit against the YMCA that owned and operated this lake. And of course, in a case like this, they say failure to warn. They didn't warn the people there that diving was not allowed into the shallow lake. They should have um, aggressive warnings about headfirst entries, knowing that most of these incidents happen in shallow water. And most of these incidents happen in open water as opposed to swimming pools. And so they sued the YMCA and came up with all these reasons as to what the YMCA could have, should have done to prevent this. Now, on the other side of the coin, the defense said, now, wait a minute, we have all this information about her background and her family's background, about how aware they were of water safety, and boating, rafting, competitive swimming and diving. And we had so much information about her aquatic background, her water safety background, that the defense was that she should have known better. And even her father, when he was deposed, said, and deposed means it's under oath, he gives a statement under oath, I can't believe she did this. She knows better. So that really hurt the family's case for suing and collecting damages. And so, because of the knowledge that she and her family had about water safety, it was my opinion, I was the defense expert, it was my opinion that this was open and obvious. She could see that the water was shallow. She knew that the water was shallow. And most people who were engaged in water sports the way she was would have heard the statistic that 95% of all catastrophic head and neck injuries occur in less than 5 feet of water. Now, so I believe there was a settlement, but it was a very small settlement for the family. It wouldn't be equal to a settlement if the YMCA had been negligent. But when you run into the open water, I have to tell our listeners why this is more dangerous than simply diving into the open water. When you run into open water, several things happen that creates a more steep angle into the water. In other words, several things are going on that make you dive more downward rather than out flat, as most people intend. Number one, when you're running into the water, as you hit the water itself kind of trips you at your ankles and your shins. So you begin to rotate forward because as you're running quickly down the beach and in the sand and on the land, you're jogging or running with speed. Now the water surface trips you up. And in many cases, people start to dive too soon because their momentum is falling forward. And so that's one thing that's working against the diver. They're beginning to over rotate because as their upper body is moving forward, their lower body is being slowed up, so they rotate faster. The other thing working against the head first diver in a waterfront area is that the sand on the bottom, even if it's a relatively hard bottom, typically it's harder than the bottom of a swimming pool. One of the reasons why we don't have as many broken necks in shallow water and swimming pools is because often the skull, the head will slide off the bottom. It'll hurt, you'll get a bump, but you won't break the neck because the skull isn't held in place. And when you have a beach like this, a lake or an ocean, when the skull, the head hits the sand, just like when a golfer hits the green with a high, lofty golf shot, when that golf ball comes down, it creates a dimple in the green, in the grass, and that holds the ball in place. It doesn't stick right there. But the same is true when you dive headfirst into a sandy bottom. The skull creates a dimple which kind of holds your head in place. And then all the weight loads up on that neck to break the neck. And so that's why we have many more, one of the reasons why we have many more neck injuries from diving in water than we do in swimming pools. The other thing that's unusual about this case is this was a female diver. And nothing against females, but when it comes to drowning and when it comes to diving injuries, statistically speaking, males are much more likely to have these events occur. And I won't get into the reasons why. We can have a podcast about that once a day next year. But males are much more likely to break their necks diving than females. And in this one case, and I think I've had 2 cases in all the diving cases that I've had that involve females. So this would be the second one. So it was unusual because she was a female, because females typically don't have the mass, don't have the weight to break their necks, whereas men do. And so basically that's it. Now, I'm really talking on this one, aren't I? I tell people who manage beaches, whether they're flatwater lakes or oceans or sounds, is they've got to do a better job warning against diving because it's so easy to do. And many, many people do this. When they see the water and they're excited to get in, they run down the beach and dive headfirst. It's fun. It's quick. It's impromptu. And so I suggest that they put up aggressive warning signs against headfirst entries using warning shapes, warning colors, warning symbols, and put them in a variety of places around the beach that no diving is allowed. Even though swimming's allowed, no diving is allowed because the chances of head first injuries, serious head and neck injuries in open water are very severe. So that's about it. That's about all I have.
Okay. And I would just add that children are less likely to become paralyzed from diving into shallow water, but it's not impossible. And it's a good precedent to set early on not to dive into the open water for
Yeah,
children.
that's a great point.
But
Now,
also, they're more flexible
you're
bones.
more flexible, you're right, and more buoyant. So you bring out a good point. But the best point you brought out was that we should teach at an early age as they're learning to swim. You never dive into water that is less than 5 feet deep, even for little toddlers. That's 5 feet should be the landmark that we keep talking about because 95% of all broken necks occur in less than 5